Hello, and welcome to this week's lecture. We're going to be talking about addressing the unethical behavior of others. And we're going to be using two different frameworks as tips and toolkits on how to deal with this very challenging and very intimidating subject called Fierce Conversations and Getting to Yes. Two different, very well researched and understood frameworks for having difficult conversations and negotiating tough topics. As I said, addressing unethical behavior is super difficult. I hear this all the time from other behavior analysts and from teachers and from managers in human services organizations that they know that there's something going on and they'd rather just see no evil, hear no evil, and look the other way because dealing with it directly is going to be very unpleasant. And so, we can think about this behaviorally in that it's a lot of escape avoidance behavior. Having emotional, difficult, confrontational conversations is aversive to almost all people. And I don't have any statistics to back that up, but I know for myself it is something that I do not enjoy. I find aversive, and I engage in escape avoidance behaviors to prevent having to be in those, to experience that stimuli. So, but we have a ethical and legal responsibility to confront and stop unethical behaviors of others when they involve our clients. So, as much as we may not like it, it's part of our job and a very important part of our job. We are often the best advocates for our clients' well-being, and while it may be easier to ignore certain situations, it's really unfair for us to avoid an uncomfortable situation just and let our client have subpar services or even worse experience abuse, neglect, or ineffective behavioral analytic services. Really, just getting back to client welfare is always the paramount concern, even if it involves difficult conversations or meetings. You have to come back to it's not about us and what we want to avoid. It's about whether or not our client is getting optimal services. And again, that is even more important than having a positive, warm, fuzzy relationship with colleagues and other people with which we work and we supervise. Um, Fortunately, there are two models which we'll discuss today that guide how to resolve these difficult situations. Before getting into these two very specific models, just want to briefly tell an anecdote that I encountered in my first year teaching in Columbia Public Schools. I had taught several years before in Texas, and I come to Columbia in the most difficult classroom in the district, and that's not coming from me. That's what I was told when I was put in this classroom. And I had paraprofessionals who had been working in there for several years. One of them was more than twice my age, and she had been doing things the same way for probably 30 to 40 years as far as punishment goes. She had a very specific protocol. I don't know if she would call it that, but that involved punishment. We're talking about students who are nonverbal, have developmental concerns, and she would place them in the corner. And she'd been doing that for years in this classroom. The previous teachers had not been successful for a variety of reasons. I don't know if they addressed it or not. All that I know is that when I came in, she had been doing it and had claimed that she'd been doing it for years, and that's what worked. Um, it was really important for me. I worked in the same small classroom with her all day, every day, as far as every school day. And she was very well respected and well liked in the entire building, and I was brand new. So her opinion of me mattered greatly as far as how I was viewed within the organization. So I had this tough choice. Do I tell her, hey, you can't put kids in the corner, like make them stand in the corner anymore? Or do I just let her do her thing because she's been there for a long time, be liked by her, and then thereby be liked by the rest of the building and the district and have my career move forward more rapidly? Well, I didn't rock the boat for the first couple weeks, but then it became very clear that this is not okay. Um, it was not. It was not effective. There is a time and a place for timeout, but it was being misused, and so I made the choice that I may make this paraprofessional very angry, and it may affect how others besides her view me in the organization, but it's for the kids' best interest. So I had a conference with her, did not go well one on one, brought it to the principal, that did not go well. Um, but eventually, she refused to change her tactics, but she was moved to a different classroom and eventually um, moved to a different building in the district. And um, she was put on probation and had to actually change her style of teaching. So, and all the perceived fears that I had that I was going to be viewed negatively for getting on her bad side, quote unquote, were actually unfounded. Um, Everybody else kind of feared her too, and what I interpreted as their respect for her was actually their fear of her. And so when I got her, through my actions, got her moved to another classroom and then another building, I actually found out that, oh, everybody else felt the same way. They were just afraid to say something. So I don't want to dwell on my personal anecdote experience, but I think that I found that that's more common than people think. People think that, oh, maybe I'm the only one that has a problem with this individual, but actually others do. They're just not stepping up to say anything. So, the models that we'll use to give us a framework to tackle these tough conversations are the first one is Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott, Achieving Success at Work and in Life, One Conversation at a Time. And this is really a guidebook on how to approach these really serious topics and have the conversations that most of us avoid, but doing so in a productive and not in an aggressive manner. The other one is one of my absolute favorites, Getting to Yes. In my master's program, we studied this at length, which was a social work counseling program, even though this book came out of the Harvard Business School. And I say it all the time that I probably used the 1 credit course on Getting to Yes more than any of my other graduate coursework. I use the strategies from this book every day. So I hope that you'll find them useful too. These are not at all required readings. I feel that both of them are pretty slim books to begin with. You could read them cover to cover in an hour or two. There's lots of information online, so I don't feel the need for you to consult the text directly. Although I encourage you, if you're interested, you can buy them used online for just a couple bucks, and they are extremely helpful in day-to-day life. I use both of these in my marriage and friendships with family, parents, grandparents, all the time. So they're really standards in how to handle confrontational situations. And as I said, your work in ABA, you're going to be working with um, parents who have very different views than you do on how to deal with children's behavior, or adult clients, their direct service staff, other professionals from different disciplines, your supervisors, your supervisees. Unfortunately, working in this field, while you may know the absolute best, for example, um, man to tack transfer procedure and how to do it to increase the range and frequency of verbalizations, that's great, and that is a very important part of ABA. That's not what I'm teaching. What I'm trying to teach in this course is how to um, not only identify the ethical challenges, but then how to effectively deal with them. And that's what this week is. So I'm a little hesitant because neither of these books are based in ABA, but dealing with these kinds of issues is an integral part of you being an effective behavior analyst. So first we're going to start with Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. This was published in 2004. I don't think there's a new edition since then. And basically, this is important because without some fierce conversations, you're not going to resolve ethical violations that you're aware of, whether it be with people that you supervise, or how a parent is dealing with the or with the client, caregiver dealing with the client. These conversations and issues are often quite emotional and difficult to have, and Fierce Conversations gives a nice outline on how to approach these situations. Because really, the most difficult situations are avoided because of fear. We fear that we're going to damage the relationship and that we're going to be in an uncomfortable situation. And that's unfortunate. We should not be afraid to have these difficult conversations. In fact, it's unethical not to. So the 4 key components of fierce conversations are compassion, integrity, authenticity, and collaboration. And we'll go into more detail. Okay, so step 1 in the fierce conversations confrontation model is name the issue. So let's get concise and specific. We'll limit it to 1 or 2 sentences. And this is all preparation. This is all done beforehand. You want to think this through beforehand. In 1 or 2 sentences, what is the heart of the problem? Too often things blow up into, you're not a good parent, you're not a good staff, you're this, you're that. There's 1 or 2 sentence that gets to the heart of the issue. Is it a concern, a challenge, an opportunity, a recurring problem that's becoming troublesome? Was it a one-time thing? But part of the script then is, I want to talk to you about the effect blank is having on blank. So I want to talk to you about the effect, to use my anecdote, the effect of putting students in the corner for timeout is having on the students' levels of problem behavior. Or, could be on their emotional health, or any number of things. Okay, step 2 is clarifying the issue. So that's often, naming the issue isn't enough. Let's get more specific. When a problem is first stated, it is often not specific enough to be understood. So it has to be very specific in terms of what people will not do and or what is the desired behavior. This is when you want to pull in data, both quantitative and qualitative. And I, as behavior analysts, I think we all definitely lean towards quantitative over qualitative data to clarify. So in my anecdote, I would say, for example, last week you put Johnny in the corner 16 times, and here are the times you put him in. So there's no ambiguity about, this isn't just in theory. There's 16 times that this happened. So this is clearly this is a problem because it happened this many times. Okay, step 3, reviewing the impact. So why is this a problem? You say something like, I feel putting students in the corner will result in them not wanting to come into the classroom, which was a part of the issue for me. They found the classroom aversive because of the amount of punishment that they experienced, so there were a lot of escape avoidance related to not wanting to enter the classroom. So we want to use I feel statements because we can't necessarily prove it at that point. But I feel that this problem will result in X, Y, or Z. So specify what are the current effects or the likely future effects, and describe your emotion around the issue and why you feel so strongly. So you can say that I feel that students will, and you could say it could damage the relationship with, with the staff. I feel that putting them in the corner will damage their relationship. And I feel strongly about this because I want strong positive rapport with the students so that we can push them academically. Or that, and bring it back to the ethical code, or if this practice is noticed by administration or reported to the BACB, I could lose my license, and that's not okay. I mean, you could go either way. You can make it like I feel strongly because my professional reputation and or licensure is at risk, or because it's damaging the client and their ability to make progress. Both of those are fine. You can choose either one. Depends on the situation, or it could even be both. Okay, step 4, describe what will happen if nothing changes. So the kind of script here is, from my perspective, the stakes are high. For example, we could say student progress is at stake, and most importantly, the level of problem behavior from students, or their ability to not be aggressive, is at stake. Or you could say, from my perspective, the stakes are high. My job is at stake, and most importantly, both of our jobs and licensures are at stake. So clarify why this is important. What is at stake? What is there to gain or lose for you, for others, the team, the organization? And yeah, you could say, most importantly, like our entire school could get shut down if this is identified or reported or whatnot. And determine what will happen if there are no personnel or skill changes. So, if nothing happens, you could get fired and I could get fired if we don't change this. What if things just continue as they are? What is the worst case scenario that we're afraid could happen? Be very clear about that. Step 5, identify your contributions to this problem. And this is one that's really easy to overlook that I feel like is extremely important. So almost always there's a little bit of culpability from ourselves. And even if there's not, trying to find some way that you can empathize with them is going to go a long way. So saying something like, I recognize my fingerprints or my culpability in the situation. I may have, and using my example, I may have not been clear about the behavior plan, or I have seen you do this and I didn't tell you to stop, or I have been neglectful in giving you more training on the negative effects of punishment. For this, I apologize. Your contributions can be covert and overt, so meaning like just your lack of action could be what it is, or overt, meaning that maybe you used to do it and you stopped and now the other people are still doing it. So just trying to find some way to say, like, hey, it is not all you. I know I'm a little bit to blame, but we've got to move forward. That can really lower the defenses of the person that you're having the fierce conversation with. So doing nothing during a crisis contributes to status quo, so you have to, you've got to do something. And this kind of goes a little bit with the next one, but as Dante said in Dante's Inferno, the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who, in a time of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. So we've got to do something. So step 6 is indicate your wish to resolve the issue. So just stating, I want to resolve this with you, and this being, the use of this timeout punishment procedure, or you taking hour lunches when you're only supposed to take 30-minute lunches, or your overuse of physical prompts. I mean, whatever the issue is, but say that I want to resolve this with you. And that is very different than how a lot of people approach it. You're not saying that I want you to fix this or I want you to stop this. It's I want to resolve this with you. State that you're not, it's not an option to continue as things go, and that the issue will not be dropped without a plan for resolution. Just making it clear that this is going to change and we're going to do this together. So step 7 is commit to action. This is one of the most important ones. So saying something like, I propose that our next step be to blank. So the next step might be, let's have a 2-hour professional development where we learn about punishment and its effects. I want input from all of you on how we should proceed with this issue. So it could be like a round table where we talk about like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. It's not an option to do this. So what are we going to do instead? What are all our alternatives? And getting their input on the solution is going to make it so much more effective, and it's going to really help with your relationship with this individual. Plans should be made specifying to what you are committing and the related timeline. It's best done with a small group. To elicit a specific commitment. If it's a larger group, like a whole school or whole agency, then general commitments might only be possible. But you not only want to line out the steps, but you need deadlines. Like, you don't want it to be something that could be just years, just vague, like, we're going to eventually get here. It's nope. Like, by the end of this month, we will have the number of timeouts down to 0 and the number of, for example, DRO positive replacement plans at the end of next month up to 80% and the following month 100%. You want specific measurable goals and deadlines for implementation, just like we do for our students in their progress. Okay, so those are the 8 steps. I hope those are helpful. They also, and I just wanted to briefly go over this, there's 4 models because there's 4 different kinds of conversational models or fierce conversations. There's team conversations, which is debates that interrogate multiple competing realities. Coaching conversations, that's when you want to improve understanding and provide impetus for change. Delegation conversations, so that's when somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be, they're not doing their job, or they're not being held accountable for doing what they should be doing. And confrontation conversations, which is engaging individuals and teams that confront and resolve attitudinal, performance, or behavioral issues. So my example would probably be a confrontation conversation, but it could also be a kind of a coaching conversation. I see team is when a team conversation is when there's a group that some feel like things aren't going well, some feel like things are going well, and some feel that there's a problem, others don't. It's getting everybody on the same page, like, different competing realities. Let's all have a discussion, debate, and look at why do you feel this way, why do other people feel this other way, and what is the truth of the matter. Coaching is when someone is just generally underperforming, and you want to coach them, motivate them to do better. So that's just like improving. This happens a lot in what a supervisor-supervisee relationship should be. Delegation conversation is when someone's working under you is just simply not doing their job. They're not performing up to par, underperforming staff. And then confrontation is when there is a behavior problem, performance problem, attitude problem, that not only are they maybe underperforming, but they're doing something bad, and you have to confront it. So all of those steps that we went over work for these. There's just different, those are the 4 kind of ways in which the confrontational fierce conversations model work. I will post a summary of this on Moodle so you guys can look at, or actually what I'll probably do is post the PowerPoint on Moodle so you can have that to review rather than just the video. Okay, so the second model for discussing and resolving and addressing ethical violations is called getting to yes. As I said in the intro, I've found this very small, very simple book to be incredibly useful at work and at home. It is the premier book on negotiation, so anyone who goes to business school or management school gets this. It's not necessarily based on organization behavior management because it's not based on encouraging, like Aubrey Daniels does, like getting staff to perform up to increasing their proficiency at skills and keeping them motivated. This is about negotiation. So this is about when you and a colleague have differing views. How do you get to yes rather than the typical like meet in the middle kind of style? So yeah, it's focused on resolution without necessarily meeting halfway or doing 50-50. The summary that I'm going to use, I have adapted from Kate Schonk, has on the Harvard Business School website blog a great summary, these 6 integrative negotiation skills, which I thought was the best summary that I could find of the Getting to Yes book. Again, you can find copies of this for next to nothing on Amazon, so it is not a bad book to have on your bookshelf when you find yourself in tough situations, but it is by no means required reading for this course. I think this summary will give you enough information for this unit and for the course. Okay, so step 1 of getting to yes is separating the people from the problem. Often we find ourselves in conflict because of a personal conflict. We don't like the person, when really there's not actually a difference in opinion on the issues. So it's not that somebody's doing something wrong or that there's something that needs to be negotiated. It's just that we don't communicate well and we don't like the person, and that is a separate issue. So let's make sure to separate the people from the problem. And also, it's easy to forget that our counterparts have feelings, opinions, values, unique backgrounds that contribute to what they say and do. So let's make sure that it's not just a personality, cultural misunderstanding. That is, there a real difference of opinion that matters here. When misunderstandings and conflicts arise in negotiation, we have to deal with the people problem directly rather than trying to get to the issue. So we have to deal with those personality conflicts before we can really get to the issue. And we want to try to imagine the situation from the other person's viewpoint. If someone's refusing to back down on a hardline position, let's, instead of just arguing your point, really try to get in their head. Try to think how he or she thinks things are going, exploring the other person's perceptions openly and avoiding the tendency to blame. So, I mean, this kind of gets to Stephen Covey, who I'm not a huge fan of, but it's seek to understand before being understood. So really, when there's a conflict, first, try to understand, like, is this because I'm having difficulty communicating with this person? Is it a cultural perception difference? And let me really try to understand, why do they want what they want? Why is it? And the more you understand that, sometimes you stop there. Then you're like, oh, so you think that this, and this because of this. Well, actually, this is a misunderstanding, because often if we really spend time on this first step, we're done. We don't have to go on to any more. But sometimes that's not enough. So step 2, and this is really the core of the book, is interest-based, not positional-based negotiating. So focused on interests, not positions. We tend to begin our negotiation by stating what we want. And the classic example, and this is not necessarily relevant for ABA, but one that's in the book a lot, is a homeowner might say, I won't allow you to develop this property. And just says that's their position. It's not an interest. When really it's, and
that's the position, but why don't they want them to develop the property? Well, I want my privacy. I don't want there to be a lot of new houses around to lose privacy in my backyard. Okay. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't develop some of this property. It means that you want maybe a half-mile buffer around your land so we can develop some of the property. It's just without compromising your privacy. So it's not, your interest can be separated from your position. I'm thinking of an example for ABA. It could be that I do not want any sort of reinforcers used for my child, which is one that I've heard before. And that's their position. And then say, okay, well, why? What is your interest in that? Well, it's because I want them to be intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated. Okay, so then if you explain that the real issue is that you don't want them to be extrinsically motivated, you want them to be intrinsically, you can teach them that, hey, that's great, we can get there, but we might have to use some extrinsic motivation to get there. So getting at the not what they want, but why they want it, the interest, not the position, can often, that is really the core of getting to yes, because we always state, we feel like in negotiation you have to have you present your bids like, I want this, and then you counter with this and counter with this. It's like, now what do we both want out of this situation? And there's often some overlap, a way you can meet both of those at once. So in our goal of getting to yes, we need to draw out the interest underlying the counterpoint's position. So why is this important to you? By identifying what interests are motivating the other party and sharing your own interest, you can open up opportunities to explore trade-offs across the issues and avoid getting yes. So as I said, there's often when I say middle ground, I don't mean like 50-50, like I want to give edible reinforcers, you don't, so let's give edible reinforcers half the time. That's not a great example of getting to yes. It is more that you want them to be extrinsically motivated. I want in the immediate point to use some, they want them to be intrinsically motivated. I want to use tangible reinforcers. So then the getting to yes would be that what is our plan for fading them out over time, rather than just doing it half the time, not that typical 50-50 mindset. Okay, the third step is learning to manage emotions, and this is so important. Be sure that you and your counterpart have ample opportunities to express and discuss strong emotions. Don't suppress them, but talk about them. Instead of just, yelling, losing your temper, saying, I am extremely upset with this, and listen to the other person and make sure they listen to you. So an important part of managing emotions is discussing them. So it's just what we teach our kids, instead of screaming, throwing a tantrum, saying, I'm mad, I want this. It's the same way. Allowing one another to speak your mind will benefit both sides. One of the quotes from the book is, freed from the burdens of unexpressed emotions, people will become more likely to work on a problem. So let them express how angry, how upset, how sad, how disappointed they are. And once they feel like they've been heard and that you understand how angry and disappointed they are, then they can really start moving a little bit as far as their position and their interest. In the book, they tell a story about a labor management group. So, we've got like a union versus management that adopted the rule that only one person could get angry at a time. So if one person is angry and expressing that, then everyone else needs to listen, because if two parties are angry at the same time, then it's just an argument and nobody's listening. So manage emotions doesn't mean suppress emotions. Managing emotions means they are going to be part of it. Let them come out, listen to them, and then get through them. And I love this last bullet. When you know that you will have your turn to express how you're feeling, it will be easier for you to listen when your counterpart has his turn or her turn. So when you know that you're going to be able to say how angry you are. It's much easier to sit through somebody else talking about how angry they are, because you know that it's not one-sided and you're not just sitting getting berated, that you're going to have your turn, and then you're more apt to listen. I really like that viewpoint. Okay, step 4 is expressing appreciation. This one's so important, and to me, it reminds me a lot of positive reinforcement in a way, and rapport building. So, throughout Fisher's career, the author, he stressed the importance of expressing appreciations as breaking through an impasse. So no one likes to feel unappreciated, and this is particularly true in a negotiation. In another book that Fisher co-wrote, he advised negotiators to express appreciation by working to understand the other person's perspective and seeing merit in that perspective and communicating understanding through words and actions. And this is always, you can always find something positive to say. So going back to my example of the individual paraprofessional who is putting kids in timeout, I said many times, like, I have so much respect for how hard you work in your position, that you've been working with this population for 30 years. There were some things that she did very well, like community outing on the job training. She did really well at a food pantry. So making sure there's lots of positives. We kind of call that the SHIT sandwich, if you will. There's probably a better term for that. But when you're going to be critical of what someone's doing or their position, make sure that you front load that with a positive, and then you end it with a positive. Not necessarily that way, but express that, look, I know, like, we have an issue and a disagreement right now, but you're not all bad. I see a lot of good things about you. That lowers defenses, builds rapport, makes it more likely that you're going to come to a consensus. Okay, step 5 is stating your message in a positive way. And this is different than the previous step in that it's the same way when we write goals. We often don't want to say, Sammy will not, use inappropriate words when conversing with peers. We want to write it that Sammy will use appropriate words when conversing with peers. So focusing on what we do want instead of what we don't want. And it says, instead of speaking on behalf of your group, speak only for yourself. So instead of saying everyone on your team feels you're not pulling your weight, employee likes to distract from to an employee, it's likely to distract her from your message, because then she'll be wondering about what everybody else said. Instead, talk about what you've personally observed and your concern. Like your recent work has fallen short of your high performance levels. So, I mean, that's saying, like, you have been performing so great. It's just right now it's gotten short. So you're trying to state it in a positive way, like, what can we do to help you do your best? So stating that we want you to get positive, we want you to do better, not focusing on we want you to stop doing bad, if that makes sense. And it's the same way with language we use with social stories and things like that, is let's talk about what we want things to look like instead of all the bad things that we don't want to happen. It's the same rule when we state rules in schools. We don't put don't run, don't curse, don't do this. We want to say walk, use respectful language, turn your work in on time. It's that positive language. Okay, and then the final step for getting to yes is escape the cycle of action and reaction. So this is the common negotiation technique, where one side announces their position, like, you cannot do this anymore, and then the other one will reject it and they say, no, I'm going to do it still at this and this time. If they do this and this, then I'm still going to do it. And then you just kind of just inch maybe towards each other, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And then at the end, neither one's happy, because maybe you've met in the middle, but it's both sides are not doing what they want. That's not interest-based, that's position-based. That's just moving your positions a little closer together rather than getting at the shared interest. So using more productive negotiation strategies such as exploring interest, inventing options for mutual gain, and searching for independent standards. Okay, so summary, getting to yes, really on this, PICO is kind of the acronym for the summary of principled negotiation. People, separating people from the problem. Interest, what is it that we both want? We both want, in my previous example, we both want student behavior to improve. How can we do that? Rather than positions of you want to stick them in the corner and I don't. Let's say, okay, we both want behavior to improve. That's our interest. Let's find a way that we both agree on to get their behavior to improve. Criteria, so results are based on objective criteria. So when we say better behavior, what does that mean? And of course, as behavior analysts, we're good at that, measuring and coming up with objective criteria. I think that's something that's going to be easier for us than it is for a lot of people in the business world. And then options, generate a variety of possibilities before making a final decision. So don't come in with, secretly like, this is what I want, and I'm gonna try to get this person to that. Come up with different options that you both agree on, and then collaboratively decide which option is the best. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to today's lecture. I want to apologize to those of you who were at the Missouri ABA conference this, 2 weeks ago now. I was planning on going, and I think I had mentioned to several of you that I would. Unfortunately, I had a family crisis with my grandmother who has Alzheimer's, and I had to help out family, so I was not able to make it to the St. Louis area that weekend, and I'm very disappointed because I was looking forward to Dr. Hanley's presentation and the business meeting and seeing several old friends and meeting many of you. So my apologies for that. There's no quiz this week. There will be a quiz next week over some of this material, but there's not one due this week. Next week, week 8, it's the last instructional week, so that's the last week there'll be a lecture and forum and all of that. Week afterwards will be the final project, so please get started on that. It is worth half your grade, 100 points. The rubric's on Moodle. Sooner you get started, the better. I cannot submit late submissions, and that's not my policy. I have to turn in grades by a certain date, so I can't extend the deadline. That's not my choice. So please try to get it in a few days early, because I guarantee you someone will have technical issues, and if you wait until the last minute, there's really not much any of us can do. So plan on having it. Give yourself a buffer in case your computer explodes or the internet goes down or something. Give yourself some buffer time for anticipating technical issues. Okay, and then this week's discussion forum post is about how you will use these techniques, principles in your practicum site. There, as always, will be a more detailed description posted on Moodle. Thank you very much for your attention.